Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to Leadership Lunch Chat. I'm Jen Wilson, and I'm here today with my good friend Amy Vetter.
Hello.
And hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, nice to see you and be with you. We're processing leadership and management ideas facing us in our businesses and facing our clients in the CPA profession and consulting professions. And Amy and I thought today that we would talk about leading in uncertainty and the importance of listening inside that leadership. And so I have been working with my Episcopal church that I grew up in to lead their board retreat. I've done it before, but I've never been a facilitator for it in such a period of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read a book called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going, Leading in a Liminal Season by Susan Beaumont. And she talks about liminal seasons are these periods between periods, if you will, these uncertain periods where the past and how it's always been is not going to carry us forward. It's dying off. It's not going to be, the same, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't know what the future holds exactly. It's not super clear. And how do you lead inside of that? And, um, one of the most important attributes is, you don't act like you know where you're going, and you don't act like you're going to be the only one. The leadership team in your organization is the only group that has to figure it out. And you start to really assess, where do people want to go? Where do they think it's headed? How do we prioritize? And you kind of go on a listening tour to get that feedback. But also that you don't remain attached to the past, which I think is hardest. I mean, they're both hard, super hard.
Mm-hmm.
Asking for feedback and really listening without defense, but also then letting go of the past. So maybe you want to take one of those pieces of leading in a liminal season and start processing a little bit.
Yeah. So I think part of what we're seeing right now, and for us personally, for people that we work with as well, is there's something pulling us toward, well, can't we just get back to the way things were? And then there's other things where people have gotten used to the new way and the new way of working, maybe that be remote working or whatever that is as an example, and them being happy with being, remote, but there's still a gap between this new way of working and what you want the outcome to look like. Where there's still face-to-face interaction and human connection and so forth. And so there's this pull to what I knew in the past. If I'd been in the office and was used to being able to talk to everyone every day and see everyone every day, that we want to just, kind of push to get people back in that situation. But the one thing that's really important is coming back to listening and not having skin in the game to the outcome. So if you're going to listen and so there's two things here. Is one thing as a leader is I'm just making the flat out decision of what we're going to do. Or the second is I'm really going to take in feedback from the people around me and come up with a solution. And so if I'm going to go that route and ask for people's feedback, it's really important that I'm truly listening, not just trying to get the outcome that I want. And that's a really hard practice, is letting go of, in yoga, it's called, not having any expectation of an outcome, which is hard. It's really hard to apply in real life because we all have expectation. when we observe ourselves and observe our thoughts. And what's important is, if we're going to listen, that we're listening with an open mind. And when we feel those stories come up for us, and it's coming up for us while someone's talking and we're not paying attention, we see that we're getting off track, is practicing bringing ourselves back to our breath, whatever we have to do, so that we get centered again and can really truly hear what someone's is saying and taking in their feedback. And that's a really hard practice. And just like exercise, listening is a practice. It's not something we're all naturally good at, because we all want to interject with our ideas or get a certain outcome. We can guide to options, but we still have to be open to listening. And I think secondly, with this, with the listening piece of it, is when we're in a situation where we can't say for sure what the outcome is going to be, it's important that we're agile in the process as well, that we're testing maybe a couple ways to see what works best, be very open to what's working, and then come up with a solution. Because in the gray, it's very hard for us to just say this is the way life is going to be, and this is, we can't just go back to the way things were, because life is different now. So I think really having an open mind while you're listening and being very present for people as they're talking, not trying to push an outcome, and being agile in the creation of the outcome is really important.
So it's like, it's like a circular argument or something. I was sitting here listening to you and thinking about, how can you push for a specific outcome when you are leading in uncertainty? And you know what I mean? Like, how can you be sure of your outcome? And if we know that the future is uncertain and it is different, and it is different than what we have experienced, we have to listen. We have to get feedback. We have to explore other ideas openly. And when I listen from my desired outcome, I listen selfishly. You and I always come back, no matter what, to generosity or selfishness. And, that's what it is. If I'm sitting there listening to the feedback from, thanks for all this feedback, but here's where we're going to head because it's easier for me, or because I like it better, or because it's the style of work I've always grown up in, then that's not, that's not going to get us to this new place that's going to be so powerful and so strategically on point. We don't know where we're going. And so in that kind of a season, and I think that applies not just to my church and to our profession, but really, last week I processed the death of that young girl, and, the uncertainty of all of us, like, what does post-pandemic look like for us? Our lives changed. They changed, and we don't really fully know exactly how, or what it'll look like in the future, or what it should look like. And, in our relationships with our kids and our spouses and significant others and others, we should be like sharing our ideas, but also listening, how were they affected? What are they processing? What are they dreaming about? So that we can move forward together and not just sort of push a selfish agenda. And, a lot of firms are going to come out of busy season, and it's the time in between spring busy season and fall busy season. Summer is a liminal season. It's in between. And whatever happened in the spring, we should be planning to not, if it wasn't good, not to let it happen in the fall, and how do we know what to change before we get to the next peak period? Well, get some feedback, listen. So, I mean, it applies in every single thing we're doing, and it is a discipline, and it does require, it's like working out or something. You have to say, I am going to go through a feedback process, and I'm going to be disciplined. And, just like you try to use good form if you're doing push-ups or something, you use good form if you're listening. And that means be quiet, take notes, ask questions that are not argumentative or leading. Really, say things like, say more about that. Tell me more about that idea, instead of why would you think that. Like pay attention to how you lead the witness in your listening. And I mean, I'm a facilitator and I do it. I don't want to do it and I try to be disciplined, but I can find myself confronted with somebody whose perspective is 180 from my own, especially when we talk about remote or blended work. And I have to be careful that I really hear them.
Yes.
It's when we're most convicted on the subject that we have the biggest risk of not hearing anyone else.
Yeah. Well, and it's the important piece of feedback or listening process to build into where you want to go into the future is building trust. And so if people feel like they're going to be at risk for telling you their opinion, it could affect their job, it could affect how you interpret them as their brand, that sort of thing, then what happens is people don't actually give you the honest feedback that you need to make the changes that you need in your business. And so it's important that if you're not good at something like this and you haven't practiced it, then you get someone that is good at it to go out and get that feedback in a very no skin in the game way and bring that feedback back and discuss it in private if you're going to have opinions that might affect the people that are giving you that feedback. So it's really important, that trust piece, if you're going to get real information that will guide you, that is established. The second thing is, as far as feedback, it's really important that you get feedback if you're practicing listening on how well you're listening. And so when we ask for feedback, it's important that we're very targeted on the feedback that we want. And so if, important factors of listening is that I was open to your ideas. Did you feel like you could trust me with your real opinions? Be very specific about the feedback that you're looking for on your listening skills, not just did I listen to you? Because that's not going to actually improve the skill. So, again, this is a practice, and you may want to practice on little things or at home or with a friend or family member or whatever it is. But the questions that you ask someone are very targeted so that you keep getting better at the skill. How did I make you feel when you were telling me uh, the answers to my questions? Those types of things that will help you go, I didn't realize it. Like,
Yes.
I had in one of my jobs, we had an executive coach for everybody. And one of the pieces of feedback was that someone had said, like, I wasn't paying attention. And I reflected back on the conversation and I was like, I was paying attention. But then I realized what happens to me is I'm thinking about something else, or my response or something else when that person was talking, and then realize I got to be really careful with my face because they might think I was in disagreement or whatever. It's just me thinking, like I'm
Yes.
actually
Processing.
processing. But that kind of feedback is really important, because if I'm not letting someone feel like what they're saying is important and that's what's happening for me, then I've got to change that in order to change the conversation. So that kind of, like, rather than get offended by that feedback, it's better to know how someone is responding to you in a conversation like that so you can get better at the skill and get the information that you want so you can make the decision in a time period that of uncertainty. If you're not good at the process, then you're not going to get all the information you need in order to make the conclusions and the hard choices that you have to make as a leader.
And that's where it does help to have other leaders involved with you that, like you're not the only listener. There are other, leaders that may be paying better attention or maybe less hooked or attached to the outcome of the specific subject that you're talking about, so they can hear it better, or, to not be the only person. The other thought I would put out there related to this query, this, asking questions. There are lots of ways, I think we're trying as listeners to be safe, a safe place for feedback. So safety is one. The other is, to be unattached and for the person to feel heard, right? So you could ask, how safe did you feel while you were sharing that feedback? And most people would feel like they have to say very safe, or safe. I felt safe, they wouldn't feel safe to answer that question. And so instead, you've got to really think about what your questions are. Maybe the better question is, what could I do next time to make the environment even safer? Like where you could really give me all your truth, and really then be quiet and listen. So, what would you change if you could change anything in our firm to make for better, peak periods in this department? What would those changes be? Mm-hmm. And they could be any change. So, and then you just be quiet and listen, and then try not to argue and try not to,
Defend.
For sure, defend or lead the witness with, questions that freak them out. We call those inquiry questions, and inquiry questions are really, like, I want to make an inquiry. I really do want you to speak your truth. I want to give you the floor. I have to set it up. But I could set it up in a terrible way, like, gosh, that client project didn't go quite as we expected. What were you thinking there when you did that? That's not a question that's going to get somebody to say, well, let me tell you what I was really thinking. They start immediately covering their tail end with a question like that.
Right.
Feels like they better start defending, or something, rationalizing, not telling you their truth. So the structure of our questions matters. And sometimes it's that directive statement instead of a question, which is, tell me more about, the changes you would make if you, if I went to Jamaica for a year and you had to run this thing, tell me what changes you'd make. And that way you try to just keep it as flat and easy as possible, where there's no feeling of indictment in the questions. And I really think that that's a skill, and also something you just have to practice every single time.
Yeah. Yep. It's just getting better and better at it. And one of the things that there's a quote about listening and leadership is, the higher you get, the less feedback you get as well. Because, feedback's always going down, downstream, but people get very scared to give the feedback upstream. Because of being at risk and the difference in stature. So being very cognizant is, the way you learned in order to get to the role that you're in was to get feedback. And so in absence of feedback, we're left to our own devices and habits. And so, it's really important that we keep that in mind, to still be open to learning and changing and growing, so that we can do our job as a leader and make the hard decisions that we have to make.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I love this processing of, how to really be a better listener in these times of uncertainty, to figure out our direction. And I'm sure we'll talk more about it as we go. And we'll be here next Friday, I think. Are we? It's Good Friday.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. So if not, we'll put it out in social media, but we'll be back at 12 noon Eastern next Friday. And we love your comments, so keep them coming. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Have a great weekend.